Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Look, I know I've talked about how we have a lot of misconceptions. And then we've taken these misconceptions before and we've allowed these misconceptions to, all puns intended, to color our view of the rest of the world. And many of us who are pro-black or not tend to say that other groups view us a particular way. And these are people that will, generally speaking, not even have friends from other groups. And so they don't really know because they don't really get to ask. They just go off what somebody else said and what someone, and he got it from somebody else, and he got it from someone else, and he got it from someone else. And then when I try to explain the nuances of it, I sound stupid. I sound like I'm waffling to the listener because they're used to hearing these oversimplified explanations of things. We are people that don't like to know about nuance. We don't want to hear about it. We don't even trust it when we hear about it. What we hear is, well, it's like, see, no, that's what we tend to hear, even though I hear people talking like this and I know that they really are waffling. Normally, I hear this when you have someone who was either raised gynocratically or you have a lady that's not willing to just give concrete answers as to how she and other women view and assess men. Really, concrete answers about anything. Those are the times I hear it and I know it's actually waffling. I know. But when it comes to other things that just have nuanced answers in order to be fair, I can tell that it's a nuanced subject and they're being asked to say yes or no to a nuanced subject. This is something that we're not the only ones to do, but we do this a lot. Yes or no to a nuanced subject. And there are times for yes or no answers. But those are to simple questions. We argue so much, we can't have that. So, I want to give an example right quick. We've tended to talk about how powerless we are, well, how pathetic as a people we are, as if we're really worse than others. Most of the time, the only thing that makes us worse than others is that we think we are, and we have potential to be better. But in reality, we're not worse than others. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times we're better. And in some other ways, we may be worse. And to give an example, well, you can ask Sand Lion, and his channel is Sand Dog, but I call him Sand Lion because I'm really not supposed to call people dogs. It's just the way that works. But he knows about the dysfunction. He's talked about it before, and I've put up a recording of him going and explaining back to back to back to back the dysfunction that you see in other groups of people. In the United States, we've tended to think of the Pakistanis as being together, and that's because they're the engineers and the doctors. Their cousins who are not engineers and doctors, if they get visas to go outside of Pakistan, they get visas to go to the UK, and they become gangsters. And they kill each other over plots of land back in Pakistan that none of them have seen. Family feuds, fighting each other and stabbing each other over plots of land in Pakistan none of them have seen. People in Pakistan have had plots of land for generations, and document forgery is a major problem. And some of them, when they're expats, they live elsewhere, they try to rent the houses out, and then they can't rent them because somebody's already there, and they also got documents proving that they own the house. Somebody forged something. And the question then becomes, does the forged document holder really believe that they bought the house from someone that scammed them? Or are they the ones that forged the documents? It becomes tricky. One man found that his house was inhabited by somebody else. He said, if you don't get out of my house, I want to tell the police what you're doing. He finally went to the police station and they arrested him. They said, yeah, the homeowner told us that you were going to come and try to scam him out of his house. And he was the homeowner. This is what happens. We tend to think that everyone's got it together. And this is one of the biggest sight games that people have put on us. What is really distinct about us is that other people feel like we're lower than them, so they're going to be in on running a sight game to make us think they got it together. Now, they're doing this with each other, too. Don't get it twisted. A lot of Asian families you think are so successful are up to their eyeballs in debt, putting on the image, putting on the front. Soon as the husband dies, then the family really finds out about the poverty, because that's when those who he owed come in and they say, well, this is the contract he signed to take out this loan and that loan. And yeah, we want our cut up from the estate. And they may be left with nothing. What, you think China Mac's the only one that grew up without his dad really being active and present and keeping him off them streets? You think there are no Chinese gangs operating in China or in the United States? Or even in other countries for that matter? But you think there are no Japanese gangs operating in Canada? No, they're there. These are misconceptions that we've tended to have. And there's another thing. Some of us are calling for some sort of split to throw out the one drop rule, which is optional. You can do it if you want. It's like I've said, whatever the black population in America peacefully decides, I guess I got to go with it. But let me tell y'all something about the one drop rule. We tend to say, well, they don't even have that in Africa. And well, which part of Africa are you talking about? And people tend to say, no, nobody else has that. Maybe they don't. But then again, nobody else is black. Unless you're black, you're not black. Unless you have black blood, you don't have black blood. I was looking at a video on Somalia's history. Guess what I found out? I found out that, there was a lady that said, I'm very proud to be Somali. Underneath the video in the comments, she said, I'm very proud to be Somali. I'm Somali and Hispanic. And when the Hispanic relatives of mine never treated me like a relative, my Somali family did. Somalia till the end. And they were writing underneath the comments and saying, yes, you're our sister. If you have a Somali parent, you are Somali. Whatever the Hispanics say, you're cool with us. Now, that sounded like a one-drop rule to me. And I think she said that it was her father that's Hispanic. Now, some would say that her mother was bedwenching and that sort of thing, but, we don't know. Her father probably could have been a Hispanic convert. It may not have been her dad that rejected her, but just her dad's relatives that did. A Liberian told me once that there are plenty of situations in which a European man may have children, or a Lebanese man has children with a Liberian woman, but the children are raised by black folks they're taken in. One, the man's family's probably not even in Liberia. Two, if they don't accept that child, no biggie. The black half of the family will. And they said it's the same even if it's a Liberian man that has children with a non-black mother. Understand, under the Liberian Constitution, at least back in the 90s, under the Liberian Constitution, you could not be a citizen of Liberia, nor could you own land unless you had black blood. Now, I don't know if they changed it, but that was what it was in the 90s. That means I could have gone and become a Liberian citizen had I chosen, because I have proof of black blood. Whereas Somebody with no black blood in them and no proof of such could have not gone and become a citizen. They could have lived there, but they could not become a citizen. That's a one-drop rule there. Now, whether you want to go with it or not is one thing, but we can't sit up here and say that, like, we're just always doing so much worse than everybody else. That's not true. I remember back in the 90s, we used to say, man, you know, the mafia, they strong. Mafia's real. How come our gangs don't last? How come our gangs always getting arrested and going to jail? Man, look, that stuff they show from these mafia movies is really old. You can't do the things that they used to do nowadays with social media. And you definitely can't get away with it. Everybody's got a very good camera attached to their phones. More than the computing power of NASA had decades ago are now in everyone's pocket in the phone. Stop and think about that for a second. And people are talking about how we're behind because we can't get away with organized crime the way they did. Man, look, the FBI, what people don't understand is that by the 1990s, the FBI was catching them one by one, because with a little surveillance and some stiff sentencing laws, they got one to roll over on the other, one to roll over on the other, with the other to roll over on the other, and it just became cyclical. And people still had to do some time. They just didn't necessarily have to do as much as they would have otherwise had to do. But they had to, even when they flipped, they had to do some time. Then go into witness protection when they got out. These are the things that they had to do. Now, the Italian-American mafia is nothing like what it used to be. It's hardly even there. And new mafias have taken over. And this is what I want us to understand. We think less of ourselves in general than what we really are, even in comparison to other groups of people. We think that we're the main ones spending what we don't have. We do have bad spending habits, but that's people in general, if you really want to know the truth. We think Black America's just a bunch of slums. And in actuality, it's about like other countries, if you really want to know the truth. You want to see the unsuccessful Indian, go to India. Their country's full of them. You barely get out of the airport before you see them. Decades ago, at the Mumbai airport, you had kids that would approach you for adult business, because that's just how bad it was there. But you had to go to Mumbai to see it. What people my age used to call Bombay. Yeah, I've talked about this before, and every so often I've got to revisit this, because Black YouTube is just alive with the chatter of how we're uniquely bad and ineffective. Look, I'm going to say this to help really drive the point home. I understand why a lot of us are saying, you know what, I'm not saying that we don't need to defect from this dysfunctional gynocracy, matriarchy, hyenocracy of hypocrisy that has become the community. As Anatole Clutch calls it, the community. We do have to. I mean, on one hand, the Golden Sphere was called for that purpose. I don't know how well of a job they're going to do in defecting, but that's one of the things it's about. The Manosphere is about a defection and fighting back against this same thing. SYSBM, if it's part of the Manosphere or not, is a part of that. That's what it's about. IBMOR is about starving the gynocrats of, pretty much denying them ding-a-ling and replacing them with sisters that are not Western and ratchet. Point I'm making is that, yeah, we do have to abandon it. But I'm going to point something out about Black America a lot of us tend to forget. Much like other nations, Black America is a lot of hoods and slums, just like a lot of other nations are. A lot of hoods and slums. with all the same dysfunctions. The incest. Yeah, all the sexual dysfunction too. The crimes of opportunity, the violence, the debt, the stunting on people, maintaining image and putting style over substance, all of that. Yeah, that's in Black America, and it's in other nations outside of America that aren't really thriving, whose GDPs are low. Okay, we got that. And Mr. Cannon rightly said, Mr. Cannon rightly lamented growing up in so-called black culture. But this is the thing we tend to forget. Black America's also some suburbs. Huxtable type neighborhoods, and then Cosby type neighborhoods. Now they're rare. I don't even know exactly where they are. I grew up Huxtable. We're not told a whole lot about where the Cosby type neighborhoods are. Because there's an upper middle class, but then there is an upper class amongst Black Americans. And we in the upper middle class, we may meet some folks from there, but we don't necessarily know where they are, where they live, when they get together. We've heard little rumors, and that's about it. But they're there. And if you get a chance to grow up Huxtable, then you know what? Black America ain't the worst thing. As a matter of fact, growing up Huxtable, you are going to begin to feel more comfortable around your own than you will around those who want to take from you, whether they are your cousins that didn't make it to the Huxtable type neighborhoods, or whether they are the Wyatts who just think you have too much and don't like you anyway. You don't really feel completely comfortable with either one of them, but at least you look at one and you say, well, his issue is that he's hungry, he's starving, he's deprived. So it's not even personal. Whereas the issue with this guy over here, I've been going to school with all my childhood and probably played with as a kid. Now his issue is simply that he started watching Leave It to Beaver and hearing his parents talk about the good old days when niggers knew their places. And now he thinks I have too much because I'm black. Not because he's hungry, not because he doesn't have it, not because his parents couldn't get it, but because I'm black. And in that's one of the ways that you get to grow up in a functional black culture, even in the U.S. What has changed is that, and this lasted about one generation, and unfortunately what did change was that many of the ladies that grew up Huxtable, well, they still wanted thugs, and many of the men that grew up Huxtable wanted to be tough and put in a lot of work to be that way. Not just to get the women's attention, but even to be safe, sometimes from their own cousins that didn't make it into the Huxtable lifestyle. I remember that myself. Never forget. For me, it seemed to be the case in middle school, but maybe that's just when I became aware of it. Those that were older than me seemed to struggle with it, but just a little bit less. Guy I knew about 2 years older than me. I remember him, he got shot. He decided that even though Mardi Gras is only a holiday in Louisiana, sometimes on the rest of the Gulf Coast, he might be able to get some days off work. Maybe. And so he went to New Orleans during Mardi Gras, and he wound up getting popped. Shot to death and got into an argument with somebody. Never made it back across the state line, except as a corpse, so that his parents could bury him. He grew up in my neighborhood, but he wanted to be tough, and he wasn't even mean to me, but he wanted to be a tough guy. And he rolled with the thugs. After his death, his younger sister couldn't handle it, and she actually turned to drugs and got involved with some thugs because they were feeding her drug habit until she could no longer sustain it herself. She wound up getting shot in the same neighborhood. She survived. So when you can make it to the Huxtable type neighborhoods, that's where you get to see, matter of fact, you may even understand why some folks become pro-black. But I wanted y'all to understand, no, we're not doing worse off. Matter of fact, when I think about it, comparatively speaking, we're probably doing a lot better because other folks that were colonized, Their countries aren't really doing much better. The countries are about the same, really. Yet they have a culture intact. And they'll brag to us about it. And when they want to sit up and say, well, look at us and look how well we're doing, you can sit up and say to them, yeah, but how come your country still can't? Why is it that you still can't lift your country up? Congratulations, you were able to do well over here. Truth be told, you were allowed to be a buffer class. See, some people think that the light-skinned Negro in America was the buffer class. No, maybe that was the intent, but that's not what really wound up working out, if you really want to know the truth. Not even every immigrant group, but only some select immigrant groups wound up being the buffer class at different times. When the Italian Americans began to show their disdain for black folks, they were accepted. Same with the Irish. You see where I'm going with this? The Chinese at one point were really vilified, especially in the 50s. In the 60s, that changed. You know why? They didn't protest like Black America did. Then they were accepted. Oh, that's not all. Look at some of the Asian ethnic groups and the nationalities that have not shown that they're going to spit on black folks, like Filipinos. And look how they don't rise up above the ranks, and even the Chinese look down on them. Koreans, same thing. We got a lot of misconceptions we're going to have to clear up. So, if you never did it before, then please do it this time. Hit the share button. Because I'm sick of the old chatter with the bad information. It's time for the new information to start being repeated. Thank you for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout. Till next time.